Jessica is an entrepreneur and investor focused on financial inclusion, the sharing economy, and social justice. She's best known as a co-founder of Kiva, the world's first people-to-people microlending website. In her new book, Clay Water Brick, that she's going to share about today, she shares her personal story of co-creating a tool for social change and the evolution of this nonprofit that started in a modest off-campus Stanford apartment and went on to be a global movement. Jessica highlights the life lessons she's learned firsthand from the entrepreneurs themselves, many of them in the world's poorest countries. So I'm going to leave no further introduction and have Jessica share her story with us.
Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Thank you all for being here. I'm touched, and I don't take the time that you're spending here with me for granted. So let me dive right in. And by the way, there's a little squeaky baby in the back, and he's mine, and I'm happy he's here. He probably will want to chime in a little bit. I'm going to first talk to you about a gentleman that I met 10 years ago named Patrick. I met him in Uganda, in a little village on the border of Kenya and Uganda. He had fled the northern area of the country years earlier because a rebel group had attacked his village, and he fled only with his brother and nothing else. No shoes on his feet, just the clothes on his back. He was young, uneducated, orphaned, and really didn't have much. And I think a lot of people would have looked at Patrick's life and thought, the situation is hopeless, this person is hopeless. But Patrick didn't believe that. He knew that he had within himself what it took to improve his life and to lift himself up out of poverty. And so one day, as he described the story to me, he was sitting, kind of leaning against the mud structure where he and his brother slept, and he was thinking, as he did every day, about what his plan was going to be to feed himself and his brother. And he sort of had this aha moment. He kind of looked down where his hand was touching the earth, and he began to dig. And at first, when he dug, he didn't discover too much, but he got a piece of wood and a scrap of metal and started to kind of use these homemade implements to dig deeper, and he found clay deposits. And he learned, as he dug, that if he mixed a little bit of water with that clay, it could be shaped. And so he created these bricks just with his own two hands. The first bricks were really rough and misshapen and kind of crumbled easily, but he kept at it. He got better and better. And soon he made bricks that were good enough, high quality enough to be able to sell, just for fractions of a penny each, but it was enough to get started. So he did that, sold those bricks, and saved up. And eventually he was able to buy a brick mold, which instantly doubled his production. He was able to make bricks that were more smoothly and consistently shaped and sized. And he dried those bricks in the sun because that's what was free, that's what he knew how to do. And those bricks sold for a little bit more than the other ones that he had just made by hand. You can see where this goes. He continued to save up money. He knew that if he baked the bricks in a kiln, they would sell for even more. So of course he saved up to be able to go to a neighboring village and to learn and kind of apprentice for a little while with a brickmaker there and learn how to make a self-contained kiln. So he did that, baked the bricks, and of course those sold for more. And eventually he was able to replace those homemade implements with a shovel and a trowel and other things to be much more of an official business person as a brickmaker. He was able to hire his brother and then a neighbor and then another. And by the time I met Patrick, he had this booming business, was doing quite well, and was a real leader in his community. And perhaps, at least to me, most notably, he showed me where sort of this epiphany had happened and also showed me the home next to it that he had built, the new home, not just the old packed mud home, but the new one with baked mud bricks that he had pulled from the earth with his own two hands. If that's not entrepreneurial, I'm not sure what is. That's Patrick. The second story I'll tell you is of Fatuma. Now, Fatuma I met about 700 miles-ish due south of where I met Patrick. Fatuma lived in a village outside of Dodoma, Tanzania, and she was also an entrepreneur. But her story ended a little bit differently than Patrick's had. So to kind of tell you why I was there in the first place, I was working for several months with a nonprofit organization called Village Enterprise, a great Bay Area nonprofit that provided, at the time, micro grants of $100 to entrepreneurs so they could start or grow their simple businesses. Patrick and Fatuma were two of these entrepreneurs, and I was there sort of surveying them, interviewing them, asking them, did you receive the money? If you did, how did it work? Did it change the trajectory of your business at all? Did it improve your life? How so? And I was doing this sort of standard of living survey and had a questionnaire that I would ask entrepreneur after entrepreneur. So these are just two of the 150-ish entrepreneurs I met during that period of time 10 years ago. Fatuma kind of pulled me into her home, and who here has been inside of a mud hut before? I'm gonna get some. There you go. So I think they're totally fascinating. I am sure that I could never build one myself, but I'm kind of a connoisseur. I kind of really love looking at the structures. So this is not actually, I didn't get pictures of her in her home at the time, but this is not actually her home. It looked a little bit like this on the outside. And on the inside, some of the nicest homes like this that I've been in looked like this, with actual furniture, different implements, quite a nice, brightly lit inside. But Fatuma's looked a lot more like this. So imagine she pulls me in, sits me down in one of the few pieces of furniture in her home. There was 2 folding chairs and a little table, and then the mattress where she slept, and that was pretty much it. So she pulled me in, sat down, and we started to talk about her business, which was a charcoal selling business. And she showed me the records that she had kept in these little blue books. Now, does anyone have like a visceral memory when I talk about this? Blue books? Like, I know I'm dating, right? I'm like the things, at least I used to write my middle school essays in and stuff. So she had blue books, kind of funny, and kept her records in there. And as we went through them, I got really excited because her business was doing much better than a lot of the businesses I had seen, even those that were quite successful. And I thought I had discovered this sort of rags to riches story. And so I got really excited. I double-checked her numbers, looked not only at that little blue book full of records, but other ones. And in fact, her numbers, panned out. They were correct. But I was baffled because as I asked her the kind of questions that I had been asking many entrepreneurs up until that point, like, how have you reinvested the profits of your business back into the business, or how have you improved your life thanks to these new profits? I didn't see anything that told me that she was actually reinvesting in herself or in her family. Her clothes were tattered, her shoes were kind of falling apart. She was very gaunt, barely ate 3 meals a day. And basically, there was nothing that I could see, no signs of newfound wealth in her home. So I asked her directly, and she said things like, oh, it's fine, my days will pass, I am okay. Like, she was very content's not quite the right word, but she had no dreams to do anything with her money. And I pushed her on it, and I said, okay, fine, but where actually did you put all this money? Because you should have kind of a nice pile somewhere if what you're telling me is correct. And she was kind of a jokester. She kind of looked around, and as if anyone else was there, and like tiptoed over to the far side of her hut and patted the ground, and she said, it's in the World Bank, which was kind of funny. I mean, you don't get a lot of like jokes when you're looking at, very impoverished situations. There's not a lot of poverty jokes out there, but she thought that was so funny. I laughed, it was funny. She had literally buried her money in the ground, in the earth floor, next to where she slept. That's what made her feel safe. That's what made her feel good. She didn't have real dreams for the future, and she certainly hadn't reinvested much at all back into her life to make things better. Every other entrepreneur that I met did have that, almost all of them. They had these amazing dreams for the future. I have a long list of things that I heard about as I asked individuals, not only what they had done already, send their daughters to school, afford 3 meals a day, buy a mosquito net, all sorts of things. But they had many other dreams for the future, travels to faraway places, new clothing, shiny electronics, education for all of their children, and on and on. But Fatuma did not. And since that day, I've sort of been fascinated by a number of things, but especially I've been fascinated by this question: what makes some people dig and find opportunity literally in the ground beneath their feet, and what makes some people bury the gifts that they have, the treasures that they do have? I don't think that the answer to that is unrelated to entrepreneurship. I do believe Fatuma was an entrepreneur, but I think the main difference between her and Patrick and the many, many others like Patrick who had really just big dreams for what was next, I think the main difference between them was that Patrick was able to imagine a different future. He had a very strong vision for what was out there for him, what could make his life better and the lives of people around him better. He had this vision, and he wasn't afraid to keep pursuing that vision along the path, even when it got difficult. I think this has to do with entrepreneurship, at least in some way, because it speaks to at least my favorite definition of entrepreneurship, my favorite academic definition, which is Howard Stevenson's from Harvard Business School. He says that entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. And maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I think it's quite a romantic idea, the pursuit of the thing that you vision in the future, the pursuit of this opportunity that you see to make things better without regard to what you might currently have in your possession. So it's about this movement forward, not what you own, not your education or your pedigree, not a pile of resources you might have at hand, not your network, just going after this thing and knowing that as you do that, you'll find what you need, you'll make your way over, around, and through. And I think the best entrepreneurs that I've met are able to do that because they have this strong vision and they know that it's worth it to keep moving forward. Okay, so I want to now digress a little bit. You might ask then, at least I do, okay, great. So if the thing that made Patrick and others so great is that they had this vision for the future, they're able to tell themselves a story for what could be different in the future, why don't some people do that? Why did Fatuma get stuck and others like her? And why do we, with everything we need around us, why do we get stuck sometimes and feel like we can't move forward? I think it's because we end up believing in the wrong stories. And so I think it's really important to figure out what we're hearing and believe the right ones, champion the right ones, retell, perpetuate the better stories in the world that really focus on potential, and not get stuck in the wrong stories. Now, I know that that's what I've had to do in my own life. And to briefly tell you my own story, we're going to go way back. When I was 5, I was in Sunday school, and I'm not trying to make fun. I just think this is how I saw the world at 5, right? This is Jesus, my buddy. I'm there on the left. Just kidding. But I just, it was a very simple. I had a very simple worldview, as I think a lot of us do at 5 and 6. And I remember the first time I learned about poverty was in a Sunday school class, sitting on the floor, hearing my lovely Sunday school teacher, who I know had great intentions, sort of haphazardly throw out different things that were in the Bible about poverty. One thing she threw out to us was this idea that Jesus told us, what you do for the least of these, you do for me. And I remember hearing that. And as a kid, it might sound silly, but as a kid, it was deeply motivating. And it was kind of the closest thing that I'd ever felt to a calling. I thought, wait a minute. So if I help people that are in need, if I help the poor, then I'm doing something for God. This is amazing. This is like the world's greatest homework assignment. I'm going to go do that. Let's go. I was super motivated by this idea that my life could matter, that I could do something important, of cosmic importance, right, in the lives of other people. At the same time, she also threw things out like this, and it was the second thing that she threw out did not give me that same sort of motivation. In fact, it scared the pants off me. She also told us that Jesus said that the poor would always be with us. I pictured in my head as a little kid this long line of people that would always be following me around, always with me, asking me for my stuff and asking me to share. And while I wouldn't have used language like, this is unsustainable, I knew that I would run out of stuff. I only had so many crayons that I could give out, I knew that this wasn't going to work. And so I felt frustrated and in fact angry at God, at the world, for if this was the reality. I felt like I had been given this great assignment, this great charge, this great mission for my life, but I was being told in advance I would totally fail, and I was angry. Unfortunately, a lot of the stories I heard over the years after that little glimpse when I was 5 years old felt and sounded and looked a lot like this. They were stories focused on sadness and suffering and desperation and hopelessness, often carefully crafted. These stories were carefully crafted by well-intentioned nonprofits and NGOs that wanted me to feel something. I mean, the feelings that I felt were panic. I felt overwhelmed. I felt quite guilty. And I felt even shameful about my own relative middle-class American wealth. But I felt bad enough that I whipped out my money and gave whenever I could, even as a kid and a teenager or whatever. And I called the 1-800 number and sponsored kids. And I hear that there is a Christina Aguilera version of this right now. I should probably update this, but in my day, this was Sally Struthers all the way. I mean, I saw a lot of Sally growing up. So I responded, but mostly, if I'm really honest with myself, I did so in a very transactional way. I did so because I was feeling bad. I was feeling like crap about my own lack of ability to ever solve these problems, no matter how much I did. And this yearning that I had had as a little kid to really be meaningful to someone else had turned into this transaction, not an interaction, a meaningful, beautiful connection. It turned into sort of throw my change in the jar, temporarily feel a little bit better about myself, and then go on with the rest of my life until the next sad story came along. And unfortunately, what this did was lead to a sort of invisible barrier being erected between myself and these stories, and really these other people that I had very much otherized and very much put in this category of, not me. So don't worry, this is the saddest moment. There's a lot of serious faces. Now it gets happier. Ready? So here we go. So this was at its worst, how I interacted with the poor. A lot of air quotes today. And then And I'm really glad I'm not talking to a college audience right now because I have to do a lot of caveats with them and say, hey, look, I'm not prescribing you do this. Like, don't blame me if you do this. But I studied philosophy and poetry, and then I, on a whim, moved out to California. I told my parents, it was right after graduation, I told them I'd be here for a few weeks. That was 15 years ago. So I moved out, and I got a temp job at the Stanford Business School, which at first, by the way, I was kind of a hater about business early on. I thought, no, I want to be a part of things that help people. Nonprofits seem to be helping people. Just go with me. For-profits must be bad, so they're the enemies. And here I was right in the heart of like enemy territory, this heart of entrepreneurial activity, because I thought entrepreneurs are the gang leaders of this is terrible. But I needed the money, so I took this temp job at the Stanford Business School, and it just so happened that I had landed not just in the business school, God forbid, but in the Center for Social Innovation, this amazing place where every day people are coming through those doors and thinking about how to use business skills and business thinking to solve social problems. So I realized very quickly I was in a good place. I had kind of found my people, and I learned so much over the next few years. I sat in on classes and crashed lectures. I kid you not, went to office hours sometimes and told professors that I was not a student. I would be later, and I would pay a pretty penny for that. But at the time, I was just a staffer. But I would go and say, look, if you have no one else to talk to, can you help me understand the difference between profit and revenue, which I actually never got a hang of until later, but I get it now. But I tried to be a sponge and absorb sort of for free an MBA and learn all that I could. Anyway, 3 years in to this job, which changed and evolved, I clearly liked it and I stuck around. There was this guy named Dr. Muhammad Yunus who came to campus. And so I stayed late after work. It was in the fall of '03, 3 years before he and his Grameen Bank would win the Nobel Peace Prize for their work pioneering modern microfinance. And so I stayed after work to hear him speak, sat in the back in case it was lame and I could leave early. And in fact, it was my little moment of epiphany. I learned about microfinance, right? Financial services and products for the entrepreneurial poor, particularly microcredit loans. I learned about that. And it almost seemed magical, the idea that this little bit of capital at the right time in the right hands could change somebody's trajectory and help lift them and their family out of poverty. It sounded amazing, and I'd never heard about that before. So that was one thing. Secondly, he talked about his story in a very accessible, approachable way. So here I was, this legit liberal arts major, but I had no idea what to put in my resume. I didn't know what my skills were. I couldn't code. I've since tried. That's another story. It's pretty hard. I don't know if that's what I'm meant to do in the world. But I learned about microfinance, and I learned about this amazing man who got his start by basically, and I'm paraphrasing, leaving the halls of academia where he had been a professor at the University of Chittagong in Bangladesh. He one day goes and sits with a group of women, basket weavers, and asks them directly why they are poor, asks them why they think they're stuck in a cycle of poverty. And they tell their stories to him. And he listens, and he responds in a very common sense way. Because they tell him that every morning they wake up, they have nothing, they have to go to a local moneylender who charges 300+% interest. They borrow a little bit of money, often just a few dollars, buy materials that they need to weave their baskets, make a beautiful product, sell it at a profit, but then owe everything back, if not more, to the moneylenders. It was a very easy to understand cycle of poverty that they were trapped in, at least when I heard that from his story. And as it goes, he reaches into his pocket, lends a little over $20 to that village full of women, and indeed, they're able to repay, not with 300% interest, and slowly change their lives for the better. That's what he did in response to their stories. It seemed so common sense, and it seemed like something maybe even a philosophy major could do. Go, sit, be a really good listener, and maybe hear something new and respond in a common sense way to help somebody. So 1, microfinance. 2, maybe I could go listen to people and do something good. And 3, he talked about the poor in a way that I hadn't heard, at least in recent memory. He talked about people who are smart and strong and hardworking and very intelligent, even if they might be unschooled, and who just needed access to this little thing, this small loan, to be able to do great things. It totally changed my paradigm. Having spent a few years in Silicon Valley by that point, I figured out that an entrepreneur was a pretty great thing to be. So suddenly to tell me that the poor could be entrepreneurs flipped everything on its head. And I was so inspired, in fact. This is another place where I tell college students, don't do this or don't blame it on me. But I quit my job at Stanford and I moved to East Africa and begged my way into a basically unpaid internship, as I described, with Village Enterprise. And they allowed me to have this amazing opportunity for 3 months to go by myself, tromp around Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania and interview entrepreneurs and ask them about their stories and ask them how this $100 had changed their lives. So that's what I did. And it was the best. It was so fun. And not only did I learn a lot about business, I did finally, thanks to goat herders, et cetera, learn about the difference between profit and revenue. That's a lot of why I wrote the book, because I feel like they really taught me business. Business school did too. I mean, Stanford GSB is a great place. I recommend it, et cetera. But in all seriousness, I mean, I so frequently thought back to my conversations with entrepreneurs when I would learn a big fancy theory in class and say, oh, right, that was that thing that fishmonger did. Or, oh, yeah, I remember. This is the way the farmer did whatever. Those were my real life examples. Those were businesses that I could understand that are started with $100. It was a really nice place to start for me. Anyway, so not only did I learn a little bit about entrepreneurship and business, but I had this new experience that really changed the way I felt and the way I thought, and it opened my heart up to different possibilities. I heard a new narrative about poverty and potential. And I met people who were smiling and actually happy with their lives and the work that they were doing, even though it was tough. I met people who already had made great progress, maybe had started with a needle and thread under the shade of a tree and now had capital equipment in an office. I met people who I happened to encounter in a scene of abundance versus carefully crafted picture on a marketing brochure for a nonprofit of scarcity. And that changed how I felt. I met people who had full hands with something to offer me, not empty ones asking for a handout, as I had sort of maybe expected, given all I had heard before. It changed how I felt, it changed how I thought, and along with my co-founder, Matt, we thought, he was back in San Francisco, and I would call him and tell him all about the awesome goat herder that I met, or the seamstress, or whoever it was. And we thought two things. One, wouldn't it be fun to tell this new story about these individuals living in sub-Saharan Africa that I hadn't heard before, and we didn't think a lot of other people had heard either. Stories of entrepreneurship. And two, instead of just holding out the jar and having people throw change in it, wouldn't it be great to engage individuals in a new way and allow them to respond differently too, maybe with a loan? Since, for the record, nobody had asked me for a donation or a handout. Nobody. People had asked for loans. They wanted to build something on their own, repay, and have ownership and autonomy. So with those two what-if questions, in the spring of 2005, we put 7 entrepreneurs' pictures, much like Sophia, although she came later, but here's Sophia there and here. We put 7 entrepreneurs from Uganda on to this little basic scrappy website, kiva.org. They needed about a total of $3,000 in loan needs. We still didn't know for sure if it was legal. We had cold called the SEC and hadn't gotten totally clear answers at that time. But we thought, surely they won't come to our door and arrest us. We'll just try. So we spammed friends and family, said, our 7 friends in Uganda need some money. Do you want to help? Overnight, the money came in. Now, to be very clear, this was like cash for my grandma and a check for my mom. And we didn't have online processing at all. It was just pictures and stories. We had our personal bank account, wired it to another friend in Uganda's personal bank account. And it was not an illustrious, fancy beginning. It was very, very scrappy. But it was enough to start. So we did. Over the next 6 months, by the fall of 2005, where I had just started business school and was drowning in accounting and trying to pass my classes, the entrepreneurs repaid, and we said, look, we did it, we're real, Kiva's a real thing, we're going to take the word beta off of the site and launch for real, which meant nothing except our friend writing a press release that we put on our own site, and that's it, that was the launch. We called our friend in Uganda, put another dozen or so businesses on the website, and just spammed our friends and family again. And we told them they could spread the word too. So the first few weeks, things were moving along, rather quickly for us. I mean, the loans got filled and time was passing. But then in November, a month after we had taken that beta off of the site, 300 blogs suddenly wrote about Kiva, including 2 of the 3 most widely read at the time, Daily Cost and Boing Boing wrote about it. And suddenly the site was slammed with traffic, and it just kicked off this crazy year where somehow in that first year, October 2005 to 2006, we facilitated about 500,000 in loans. The next year, the total went up to 15 million, the next year 40, the next year 100. Today, Kiva is about to cross 750 million in loans in these little $25 bits from people all over the planet. So it's been a crazy thing to get to watch. And it's not just loans in East Africa, and it's not just to individuals, although here's an example there. It's also people in my own hometown. Any Pittsburghers in here? Just gotta check. Go Steelers, right? So Kiva works throughout the world. I'm happy to go more into detail on Kiva if you'd like. Loans are not always just used for business activities too. They're used for other things, sometimes housing, sometimes just other consumption loans. But investing or lending money to entrepreneurs on the side is still what the core of Kiva is all about. And it's been really a wonderful and fun experience to watch it grow. So that's just one thing that I've had the honor of being involved with. I left Kiva, I started another company a few years ago. Worked for a venture fund called the Collaborative Fund, really fun. The fund invests at the seed stage in sharing economy type companies. I can talk about that more if you'd like. But here's what I kind of want to end on. So my definition of poverty has kind of changed over time. I still very much believe that at its heart, it's really about lack of access to basic things, basic needs: food, clothing, shelter, basic healthcare, information. I think it's about a lack of access to opportunity and lack of basic freedoms, lack of capability. But here's the thing. Day to day in my life now, I encounter a lot of other kinds of needs too that are often invisible, and often the things that are the greatest need in communities like this, where we're all quite privileged and quite blessed with all that we have. And I find that just as sad. I think I meet people all the time who might be very wealthy materially, but are poor creatively or emotionally or spiritually, and they feel stuck, even though they have everything they need to move forward. They feel trapped even though they're free. And I think that's tragic in its own way. I think the main problem is that they, like many others all around the world, have forgotten, just temporarily hopefully, that they can imagine and then pursue a different future for themselves, whatever that looks like. So I would just like to remind us today, please don't believe the wrong stories, the ones that are incomplete, just telling one side of things. Don't believe the wrong stories, especially about other people and about what's possible in the world for them. And don't believe the stories that tell you can only respond in one particular way, that you're only needed for this one thing that you might have, whether it's financial contributions or something else. I want you to practice. I hope we can all practice imagining a new and a better future, one that reminds us that more is always possible. I ask this for very selfish reasons. I want my kids, I know it's totally cheating to end on a kid picture, and one of them's here, the other two are not, because that would have been a little crazy. I want the stories that my kids hear and believe and internalize to be ones that convince them of the reality that opportunity is everywhere, sometimes even in the ground beneath their feet, and that human potential is everywhere around the world, even and especially inside each one of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
That was amazing.
Thank you very much.
This is probably one of the only tech talks I've been to where it was standing room only. So
Oh, that's
you
so
should
nice.
be very honored, and I'm really
I do.
thankful for all the Googlers that took their time to
Thank
come
you.
listen to you.
Thank you so much.
So how long did you work on the book? How long
Oh
did
my
it
God.
take you to get through it? What was sort of the hardest part about putting all of this into words?
Well, so you might see him now walking around with the baby, but my husband is like the real author of now I am saying this, not him. He's a legit author. He has like half a dozen books out, and I am the entrepreneur that wrote a book. So what was really difficult was thinking it would be easier than it was, because he makes it look very easy. It took me several years, and I'm just gonna be super honest. This might not be good for, sorry about this, I don't want to cough on my, excuse me. This is, don't quote me on this, can I say that? But, you know, as much as I am, and I am totally and completely like, women can do it all, working moms. For me, I had moments where my brain did not work quite right, after the twins especially. And so I definitely had to just like be gentle on myself and stop writing some days, because I couldn't think of the word for that thing that you sit on, like chair. I mean, I literally lost very basic words. And I tried to Google why that was, and unfortunately, I think I'm very bad at searching. If anyone can give me some lessons, I am not even joking, I would be very grateful, because all I found was stuff that was like, when, you know, right after birth, the mother's brain grows, and I think it grows like, it's like an animal brain though, not like an author writing sentences brain. So anyway, it took me like 4 years of back and forth, and I turned in one manuscript that was fine, but then I was like, can I actually change that? And then it took another year. It took me a long time. That's my answer. Thank you for asking.
What advice would you give for someone that's interested in social change?
It's a nice question. I would say get specific and personal about who you want to serve. That's, for me, I think the best question to start with. There are lots of objectively good things to do in the world. There's a lot of needs. You can, I think, go crazy if you try to just make it about where will I make the most impact in a general way, right? Like, where will my dollar do the most good? Definitely research that stuff and figure it out, but go with your heart, go with what you're passionate about, and then get close to the people that you want to serve ASAP, right away, early in your career if you can. But at any time, just make a point to get out of your comfort zone and go spend time with the people you want to serve. One of my favorite books is Paul Pollock's book, Out of Poverty. And he basically says, I'll just paraphrase him, he basically says, like in the first few chapters, look, don't even try to go help people far away if you haven't spent major time with them because you'll probably screw it up. He's not that harsh about it, but it's kind of what he's saying. And there are lots of, probably as you know, stories of people with great big hearts and great intentions that just miss the mark because they think they have a great idea of how to help, but it actually doesn't map with what people need on the ground. So get there, get close, get personal, and be a really good listener.
You talked about how Kiva kind of was such a success and grew and grew and grew, but I'm sure you faced some challenges along the way, and I'd love to hear kind of what some of those challenges were.
Yes.
But also what motivated you to keep going, and how you were able to overcome those challenges.
Really great question. So there are a few. So I'll start with the easy stuff. The easy challenges were more up here, like people. In the very, very beginning, when we had this idea, hey, wouldn't it be fun to loan money to our friends in Uganda and beyond? Traditional, like, for-profit types and socially responsible investment folks, I mean, experts, people who had decades of experience, pushed back and would say things like, well, why would you think somebody would want to do this weird 0% loan? There's no financial return. And on the other side, nonprofit folks were like, it's not a tax-deductible donation. That's silly. But we thought maybe there was going to be a market for that anyway, and there is. But that was one thing we got back. So that was one piece of criticism that it's easy to rattle off now, but it actually was, it was a little bit crazy making. I think a lot happens up here in the very beginning of ventures where a lot of entrepreneurship feels like make-believe. You have this vision for the future, and you're kind of imagining what the world will be like if you can get there, and you're trying to make-believe. You're trying to make the thing that's in your head real. And when other people tell you it's silly or impossible or won't work, it can rattle you. So that was one, that's like the least of the issues, of the challenges, but it was something to overcome. There were also other challenges at the beginning around, which we can all sort of giggle at now, but around, will technology really spread that fast? Will you really be able to get a picture of people in Africa? It was kind of funny. So that was easier to fight and to just prove to be incorrect. The harder stuff was the emotional stuff. So that picture of me with the turkey 10 years ago, during that time, I lived with a family just for a short while, but became really close friends with a family in Uganda. And this guy, Moses, was virtually a co-founder with Matt and me, and became a really good friend. And over the first year, because we had this onslaught of demand from would-be lenders, I'm not going to say we created a monster because he's a wonderful person. We definitely made it difficult for him and put a lot of temptation in front of him. He was a pastor in this small village and had only ever seen a few $1,000s at any one time, if that. And suddenly we were like pushing hundreds of thousands at him to distribute to a lot of entrepreneurs. And so there was a case of fraud, and it was just kind of heartbreaking to see our friend, make bad choices. But we also we were so green and so, I'll use the word naive, and had not built in the right systems for accountability and transparency and that sort of thing. So the good part of that was that we were able to respond with, okay, what do we need to change? What do we need to improve? And over time, a lot of great improvements, I think, to the product and to the site in general have been because we've been pushed to get better and to refine and to iterate. Sometimes because something not great happens, but other times just because that's what you do. So I think the really important part of your question is, like, how do you get through those times? One, I don't think it's ever really smart, at least not for me. I'll speak for me personally. I don't think it's great to go it alone. I always had people around me, whether it was just friends or family or my co-founder or the early team, that believed in the vision too and said, no, remember, it's real, this is where we're going, we got to keep at it. Just the encouragement of people really helped. But also, I think at some point you just need to make a choice to see the good in people and believe that it's still there, and believe that. It's so funny, I did, it was really fun, kind of a bucket list thing for me. I did a forum this morning with Michael Krasny, and it was an hour, and in between all the breaks he was pushing me on the goodness of people and He thought I was very Pollyanna about it, and we have a nice, healthy debate. But I really think you look at a lot of the sad stuff, the bad things that are happening in the world and the bad choices. I'm such a parent, right? I'm like, you made a bad choice. Sorry. So like, I notice I'm using more and more mom language. Oh my Lord. Yeah. So when you see that, I really see people who are hurting, who haven't been given even a fraction of the opportunities that I've been given. And I think their reactions to the world aren't always forgivable, but are understandable. I can see where they come from. So I think you just need to choose to believe that we all start out with great intentions and the same common desires, and more and more, the more and more we can provide opportunity to people, the better things get, and the more the good in all of us can come out more easily. I think you just have to make a choice.
So as you have traveled the world and met a diverse group of people, what is their perspective on us, on America, on people from America? How do they perceive us? And a follow-up to that would be, regardless of color, country, religion, what is the common theme that you've heard from all of these folks, that one thing that you would pick?
Yeah. So I guess it's very hard to make a generalization, and it's probably self-selected, but the people that I've encountered have been people that in some way have been connected to, I think, good organizations that I've been a part of. So I've kind of encountered a lot of really friendly, nice people who are very happy and thankful and excited to talk about Americans in the US. I know that there is other sentiment out there too, but I've encountered a lot of goodwill. What's, I think, also positive and notable with the Kiva experience in particular, even though a lot of lenders are in North America, not all are. And so to be able to talk to borrowers about this global community of supporters, I mean, almost all over the planet, when you look at the number of countries where borrowers and lenders are, it's all over. So to be able to say, there's this global community of people who have read your story, who care at least enough to chip in $25, if not more, who are cheering you on and think you're important, that's a really wonderful message to be able to deliver. So I think all else being equal, and maybe I'm being a little bit too utopian about it, but all else being equal, to be able to have a loan versus a loan with all these people behind it, I think that's a really beautiful option, and I think that's well received in most places. That's been my experience. What's the one sentiment I've encountered in all these entrepreneurs? I have just been blown away by the perseverance that exists to make life just a little bit better. Now, sometimes it's only relatively better. Sometimes it's in this absolute way. But again and again, the drive that I see in individuals to make life better for themselves, and more often than not for their families, is it's so palpable and it's so powerful. It blows me away. And part of what I'm really hopeful comes across in the book is that hopefully I honor those and celebrate those kinds of stories. People make it work, even when it seems like it can't. And I feel so lucky that I've gotten to see that.
I'm really interested, now that you've scaled, how you vet all of the people who are asking for loans. And I've heard different things about, in general, like working with partners in different ways. And I don't know if that's related or unrelated to this, but I'd love to understand kind of that dynamic and how it all works.
Sure. So it is no longer just me running around Uganda with my camera. Thank God. It would be super fun, but it would not be scalable, as they say. So classic Kiva, kind of the way, there's two ways Kiva works today. The way it's worked traditionally and still does for the majority of loans is this, as follows. So you have lenders who come to the website that Kiva runs, and there are field partners that actually are out there, these banks for the poor, kind of the Grameen banks of the world, but there are many other types as well, and a lot of kind of non-traditional partners now, not just microfinance institutions, maybe NGOs that also happen to give loans in addition to other things. So you have lenders that come to the site that Kiva perpetuates, you have field partners, and you have borrowers. There's sort of four parts. Lenders chip in their $25. It goes through the site. Kiva doesn't touch it. It goes through the microfinance institution. They don't touch it. It goes into the hands of the borrower. The borrower repays with interest that's fair and appropriate and set by those those field partners, to make it more general. Sometimes that can be 20, 30%, but you have to remember, you have to compare it to the right things, and you have to understand what are the other alternatives, if any. And often it helps, I think, understand the incredible amount of work that is necessary, usually, to reach a borrower in a very rural area, to get out there and do weeks of training, if not months, to collect repayments sometimes every week after the loan's been dispersed. So interest rates kind of make sense, and Kiva only works with ones that at least the organization believes are fair and appropriate and okay. So anyway, loans are paid with a little bit of interest. The interest is kept by the field partner. The principal comes back through Kiva and into the hands of the borrowers. Kiva never takes any out of that. The only thing that can happen, so there's a few things that can happen if this is interesting. So, lenders. I said borrowers, but lenders are over here. Lenders take on default risk as well as currency exchange risk in some cases. So they might not receive all the money back or not at all, but that's quite rare. Repayment rates are almost 99% on average. So usually the money comes back and everything's great. That's Kiva Classic, okay? So the way, to answer your first question, I think you asked two, but I'm going to make it two anyway. The way that the borrowers are vetted, it's all done on the ground by these experts, these expert organizations that know their stuff. They're in the community. They've already existed before Kiva usually. They know who's, they have their own ways of doing training and vetting and all that good stuff. So that's how that happens. Now, there's also over the last few years a new way that Kiva's been doing things called Kiva Zip. And for the sake of time, I'll explain it super, super concisely. Instead of lender, Kiva, field partner, borrower, it's lender, Kiva, trustee, just an individual borrower. And it's much more direct and it's kind of like Kiva Light. And the trustee just vouches for the reputation of the borrower. I think that's the way, at least in the US for sure, but I think in other places the way things are going to move. And it's lighter, it's more mobile, it's exciting stuff.
If you're, depending on how close you are to the field partners, like how did
Yeah.
they vet someone to know like if they're
Great.
right for a loan or not?
Great. Okay. Thank you for. You can totally interrupt me and be like, "That's not what I asked." Reroute.
Super interesting.
Okay.
I promise.
Sorry.
Thank you for saying all that.
No problem. So, field partners, they each have their own set of criteria. So now my answer is not even going to be satisfying because it's going to be an "it depends" answer. But they all have their own set of criteria. Some only serve women. Some require training before you can even apply for a loan. Some, they have quite long application processes. It's all different, but they kind of know their communities and know how to do that. We can talk more after. Is that okay? I feel like that's my best I can do. Okay.
So I just had a question about what sort of makes a good story in your mind and how you go about making sure that you're creating the right story. I can already see challenges around things like trying to make a representative story versus a really inspirational one, or whose perspective from a storyteller is sort of being served, you or sort of the actor involved.
Yeah.
So wondering how you approach all those questions.
Well, so one of the things, I want to be super clear because I'm not there today. It's, full-time, everyday staff. I feel like a grandma. Like I get to be really proud and show pictures, but I'm not doing the hard work every day. So I don't want to speak for exactly what's happening now. But I will say, at the beginning, first early years, we were really excited not to have it to be too polished, to just have whatever people wanted to put up there speak for itself and have kind of the opposite of this very carefully crafted, kind of manipulated story that we saw so much from other organizations that probably kind of gamified it, right? Like they knew exactly what keywords to put in to make it hit ya in a particular way. So right now what happens is those field partners, see, your other question there was great setup. So now you know what a field partner is. They have loan officers or other representatives that are out there with borrowers. And while they are the ones that bring the information back, it's not like the borrowers are typing up their own stories at this point, at least not in Kiva Classic. They might have basic guidelines on like questions to ask and things like that. But the intention, at least early on, was never for it to be a super polished, hey, make sure to mention how you're going to use the profits from your business for education because people love that. And it's not like, oh, that's a great picture, but can you have your kid in there? Because people love kids, right? I'm so guilty of it myself. So anyway, that's sort of, I think, the ethos. That's the spirit of how Kiva operates. In terms of what I personally think makes a good story, I think transparency and balancing, I don't know. I think being as personal and as honest about what you're going through as you can is kind of all you can do, and that usually resonates the most with people. I think people want to be let in kind of the inner circle and to feel like they're really participating and really a part of it. Some of the who asked the challenges question back there? Yeah. So some of the more challenging moments when we've had to talk about, oh, sorry, your money's not coming back because this field partner, did something terrible, which is few and far between, but it's happened. I remember being terrified the first time to put that story out there into the world and explain to people what had happened. But the transparency of it, we didn't get an angry email or note back. People were like, thanks for being so honest. This is really hard work to do. We get it. We're going to relend anyway, or we're going to lend new money because we're not getting our money back. But they were very supportive and appreciated, I think, being in the trenches with us and on the ground and hearing the honest stuff. Yeah. Thank you all very much. And
Thank you so much.
I'll stay for a while. So
Yeah.
thank you.
so much.